The first-person shooter genre is one of the oldest in the medium of video games, yet it remains extremely relevant and popular to this date. Over the last 3 decades or so, fans have gotten the opportunity to experience a ton of amazing games of this ilk, and this feature is a celebration of the best of the best. So, join us as we run down 30 of the best first-person shooter games of all time. Resident Evil Village. The Resident Evil series has seen its fair share of remakes in the form of the stellar Resident Evil 2 and the disappointing Resident Evil 3, but it has consistently delivered high-quality follow-ups. These include Resident Evil 7 and its follow-up Village, the latter of which represent the best of what the series offers. Resident Evil Village majestically swerves from one kind of horror to the next without any hiccups, and the action keeps pace with the changing scenery and shifting mechanics. The core gameplay of shooting down zombies is much faster than Resident Evil 7, but it retains the heft and groundedness of a survival horror game that comes together to make it one of the best in its class. Turbo Overkill. Boomer shooters have gained a ton of popularity in the past couple of years, and while there's no shortage of great games to choose from, our pick has to be Trigger Happy's 2022 release Turbo Overkill. The art style in this game looks like a glorious throwback to classics like Quake, and the action can get pretty intense with large arenas filled to the brim with all sorts of enemies. You also have a bullet time ability to keep things under your control, and the end result is a combat system that requires steadfast thinking and tactical knowledge to succeed in the toughest encounters. Of course, it's extremely fun to play as well, and fans of old-school shooters should definitely check it out. Halo: The Master Chief Collection. Halo is easily one of the most important franchises when it comes to first-person shooters, and Halo: The Master Chief Collection is the definitive way to experience the high-octane adventures of Master Chief and his sidekick Cortana. The package comes loaded with 6 games, complete with visual upgrades and quality of life changes, and the ability to play multiplayer with friends is just the icing on top of an already lovely cake. Destiny 2. After laying the blueprint of a modern first-person shooter with the Halo trilogy, developer Bungie went on to create Destiny in 2014. And that game would lay the foundation of what would become its magnum opus 3 years down the line. We are, of course, talking about Destiny 2, which still stands tall as one of the best live service games on the market, and that appreciation can be chalked down to 2 simple reasons: supremely satisfying gunplay mechanics and constant updates that add meaningful activities to this continuous experience. It's no surprise that fans continue to clock in hundreds of hours even after 5 years since its release, and things are only looking bright for the game from here on after. Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2 suffered a rough launch on account of it being sandwiched between other big games of 2016, but that doesn't detract from the fact that it's a wonderful game through and through. The single-player campaign is easily the biggest highlight of the experience, which not only features likable characters like BT-7274, but also creative levels like Effect and Cause, which make for a constantly thrilling ride. Of course, the multiplayer modes are also pretty fun, with interesting progression that would make you want to keep coming back for more. It's a sad state of affairs that EA has largely abandoned the franchise, but it was fun while it lasted. Half-Life ALYX. After a not-so-brief hiatus spanning more than a decade, the Half-Life series made a comeback with 2020's Half-Life ALYX, a prequel set before the events of the second game. While it's not the Half-Life 3 that fans were hoping for, it's easily one of the best shooters in the VR space, simply due to how well it realizes the potential of the platform. Almost every object in the surroundings can be interacted with, and the puzzles and combat make good use of these options to craft a compelling gameplay loop that's best in class. Left 4 Dead 2. Left 4 Dead 2 was released in 2009, and more than a decade later, it still stands tall as one of the best co-op shooters on the market. Making your way through hordes of zombies remains as chaotic as it should, and the dynamic difficulty does a great job of ensuring that players remain on their toes. It's a highly replayable gem that continues to be fun thanks to a strong gameplay core underpinning it all, and many have tried to replicate this experience with varying degrees of success, but none came close to matching this timeless classic. Superhot. Superhot is a game that operates on a simple framework of the game only moves when you do. But that simple premise opens the door to plenty of creative possibilities to take down your enemies in absolute style. You could be dodging a bullet at one instance, hijacking an enemy's gun at the other, and then finally shooting them off, all while carefully assessing the current situation and plotting your next move. It has a supremely satisfying gameplay loop that rarely gets stale, and you can even experience it in VR, which adds a ton of value to this package. Far Cry 2. 2008 saw a number of great games, but one of them stood among the rest. The excellent open-world adventure with Far Cry 2, which transports players to the dense and dangerous savannas of Africa in search of the titular jackal. The action can be extremely brutal, with guns constantly jamming mid-battle and the constant looming threat of a malaria stroke. But what makes this sandbox so fun is the systemic gameplay overruling it all. You can burn down entire forests with a flamethrower, come up with all sorts of creative tactics to defeat enemies, and much more. This kind of systemic gameplay was inarguably the highlight of the experience, and this is what would go on to lay the blueprint for the majority of open worlds of the future. Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 is easily one of the best sequels of all time, simply because its expanded suite of ideas dwarfs the scope of the first game. The story's more impactful, featuring well-written characters, and the gameplay builds upon the foundations of the original with more intense firefights and plenty of set-piece moments that will remain with you long after the credits roll. The physics-based puzzles make a return, and they strike a great balance between accessibility and brain-tickling. All in all, it's a constant thrill ride that makes you want to keep playing for hours and hours. Overwatch. Overwatch might as well be Blizzard's magnum opus, which is saying something, considering that it's the same team that brought us classics such as Warcraft. Despite being the developer's foray into first-person shooters, Overwatch nails the game feel when it comes to movement and shooting mechanics. But what makes this game so special is the careful balance that it manages to strike between mechanical prowess and tactical know-how. Knowing how to shoot well is just as important as choosing the right characters for the job in Overwatch, and the constant stream of updates has done a great job of keeping the community engaged for a long time. Hunt Showdown. Hunt Showdown is all about hunting exotic monsters with friends in a wide variety of locales, and it can make for an extremely fun time. It looks absolutely gorgeous, which is to be expected from the CryEngine, but it also plays very well. Guns are impactful, player progression keeps things interesting, and the gameplay loop of the familiar cat-and-mouse chase keeps adrenaline levels at a consistent high. Hunt Showdown is an underrated gem, and it's a shame that it never got to enjoy the longevity it deserves. Wolfenstein: The New Colossus. Machine Games has done a fantastic job when it comes to revitalizing the Wolfenstein franchise, and The New Colossus is definitely the best in this new line of games. You step back into the shoes of series protagonist B.J. Blazkowicz as he rises to the occasion to take down a fascist Nazi regime, and the journey's punctuated with plenty of high-octane firefights that will not only test your mechanical prowess, but also endurance as enemies just keep on coming. The gameplay itself is a mix of modern FPS staples with old-school mechanics, like no regenerating health, which makes for a markedly fresh experience. The level variety and set pieces are equally fantastic as well, making The New Colossus a thrill ride like no other. Metro Exodus. 4A Games' Metro series has come a long way since its humble beginnings, and its last release, Metro Exodus, is the biggest and arguably the best outing to date. The vast levels are filled to the brim with all sorts of opportunities, and Metro Exodus puts forth a strong gameplay loop where systemic elements and player agency are the two biggest driving factors that come together to make a highly dynamic game. It's also one of the most beautiful looking post-apocalyptic games of recent memory, and if you haven't tried this one, this is your cue to give this one a shot. Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 is a game that knows its biggest strengths and does a great job of crafting a fun experience based on them. It improves upon the original with a markedly more fun story that features witty yet memorable characters like Handsome Jack, and the gameplay loop of looting and shooting remains an absolute joy, even after hundreds of hours of grinding through quests. It's also a highly replayable experience with so many possibilities for crafting all sorts of wacky weapons. It's one of those games that'll keep you coming back for more. Battlefield Bad Company 2. Battlefield Bad Company 2 has to be one of the most definitive first-person experiences out there. It has one of the best campaigns in the genre that's filled to the brim with memorable set pieces, and the multiplayer modes are much tighter than before, with smaller maps and teams, making it an unmissable experience. Escape from Tarkov. Battlestate Games' Escape from Tarkov is a weird but beautiful mishmash of different genres. It's a mix that surprisingly works well. Tarkov is a brutal first-person shooter that features incredibly realistic gameplay mechanics, which requires you to be thoughtful of every move you make, or you'll find yourself surrounded by danger. There's also the constant threat of real-life players that roam these maps in addition to the AI enemies, which can make things even tougher for you. Understanding the many intricacies of this complex game and crafting strategies is what ultimately makes playing Tarkov such a rewarding experience, and it's no surprise that fans continue to spend hundreds of hours on this game, even years after its release. Metroid Prime Remastered. At first, Metroid Prime looked like a project doomed to fail, but when the game finally released in 2002, it instantly cemented itself as an unmissable entry in this long-running franchise, and one that would pave the way for its future. Metroid Prime beautifully combines the curiosity of exploration and gradual progression of acquiring new abilities with the action-packed combat for a first-person shooter, and the end result is nothing short of extraordinary. The recently released Metroid Prime Remastered smartly soups up the experience with updated controls, better visuals, and plenty of quality of life upgrades that make going back to this classic a must. Black Mesa. Valve was one of the first studios to combine a meaningful story and physics-based puzzles within the framework of a first-person shooter, which is what made Half-Life such a big deal in the 90s. Black Mesa is a Valve-approved fan remake of Half-Life that was finally released in 2020, and it's definitely the best way to experience this classic all over again. Visuals have been redone completely in a new engine, and the gameplay has been smoothed out to placate modern audiences. There are plenty of quality of life improvements that longtime fans might be able to notice. It's a pretty solid game overall that you should definitely try out. GoldenEye 007. Rare's GoldenEye 007 stands tall as one of the best licensed movie games of all time, and this high-octane adventure also doubles as one of the best shooters of its time too. Despite the inherent limitations of the N64's single-stick controller, GoldenEye 007 controls surprisingly well, and it's a lot of fun to move around and annihilate everyone in the room with silenced pistols and machine guns. The level variety is top-notch with tons of different objects, and the split-screen multiplayer modes will ensure you'll be coming back for more. TIMESPLITTERS 2. TIMESPLITTERS 2 puts players in the shoes of Sergeant Cortez as he hops from one time period to the other in hopes of stopping the Time Splitters, and it's a wonderful ride through and through. Each level is markedly different from the last, not just in terms of visuals, but also weapons and enemies, which makes getting through it all an absolute blast. In addition to this, TIMESPLITTERS 2 also provides a big suite of options when it comes to multiplayer and split-screen co-op, all of which came together to make this game the life of every party back in the 2000s. KILLZONE 2. Despite starting life on a misleading note, courtesy of the pre-rendered E3 trailer, KILLZONE 2 stands tall as one of the best shooters on the PlayStation 3. The campaign makes great use of the cover-based shooting mechanics to craft all sorts of interesting scenarios, and it's paired with a simple yet engaging story that'll make you want to keep on playing through to the end. Multiplayer has also seen substantial improvements over its predecessors, and players would spend dozens upon dozens of hours duking it out against each other in a wide variety of game modes. System Shock 2. System Shock was one of the first games to successfully blend role-playing elements within the framework of a first-person shooter, but its sequel, System Shock 2, is when the series really came into its own. System Shock 2 is a more refined take on the original, and everything from the storytelling to the exploration and combat is drastically improved in an effort to create a brutal experience through and through. In many ways, System Shock 2 laid the foundations of survival horror games, which makes it a worthy candidate to be on this list. Duke Nukem 3D. Duke Nukem 3D stands tall as one of the most popular shooters of the 90s, oozing with bombastic gameplay and fun mechanics. Duke Nukem 3D had a ton of personality that many of its peers lacked. Our protagonist Duke Nukem would crack all sorts of jokes while thrashing the many demons that lay in our path, and that witty writing is accompanied by a solid gameplay loop that remains enjoyable right through to the end. BULLETSTORM Full Clip Edition. Much like Duke Nukem 3D that we discussed before, BULLETSTORM is an over-the-top shooter that draws you in with its solid set of shooting mechanics and witty writing that add a lot of charm to its fast-paced action gameplay. The multiplayer modes might be a bit shoddy, but the amazing single-player campaign more than makes up for it. The Full Clip Edition soups up the 2011 original with clean visuals and all the post-launch DLCs, which makes it the definitive way to experience this game. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. Rainbow Six Siege is yet another live service game that's been going strong for almost 8 years now and shows no signs of slowing down. And that success can largely be chalked up to the deeply methodical gameplay that dares you to understand its many intricacies and come up with different strategies for each new situation. The environments are highly destructive, which ensures that matches on each map don't get stale after a point, and the many operators function very differently from one another, which makes for a highly engaging experience. Stalker: Shadow of Chernobyl. The Stalker series is home to some of the best and most brutal post-apocalyptic shooters of all time, and Shadow of Chernobyl represents the series at its peak. Sure, it might not look too attractive with its dated visuals, but it's an experience that needs dedication and time to truly shine. Surviving the exclusion zone is a tough task, and you must use your wits and make smart decisions about the faction you choose to side with, the resources you collect, and the fights that you choose to take up. It's a one-of-a-kind experience, and we can't wait to see how the series evolves with the upcoming Heart of Chernobyl. Black. Criterion Games' Black is easily one of the most underrated shooters on this list, which is a shame because it features one of the most brutal combat loops of its time. Each shot of your weapon is accompanied by strong waves of audio and visual feedback, which makes for a consistently intense experience that's just hard to put down. While the Black franchise might not have garnered the legacy of its contemporaries, that doesn't make it any less worthy than those releases. Payday 2. Payday 2 is all about trying to pull off the cleanest heist with your friends, and it's a game that you could play for hundreds of hours and not get bored of it. It's a lot of fun to craft the perfect strategy for any heist, see those plans go to waste, and then improvise on the move. Apart from that, there's also plenty of varied content to choose from, customization options to unlock, guns to upgrade, and much more, which will keep you coming back for more. Payday 3 is just looming over the horizon, and it'll be interesting to see whether it can surpass the legacy of this classic. Splitgate. Developer 1047 Games' Splitgate is easily one of the best surprise hits of recent memory. Combining the fun gunplay of first-person shooters like Halo with the ingenious portal mechanics of Portal, it's an idea so ridiculous that it works extremely well. The game has lost a lot of fan interest as of late, but the mechanics are creative and well thought out. Unfortunately, the developers have ceased development and have moved on to making a sequel on Unreal Engine 5. And with that, we've reached the end of this video. Have anything to say? Let us know in the comments below. Also, we upload new videos every single day on Gaming Bolt, so please consider subscribing as it really helps us out. Thanks for watching.